afternoon, and welcome to this week's episode of LevelUp Cyber. My name is Tony Bryan, your host and the executive director over at CyberUp. I've met Travis, today's guest, about, I want to say a year and a half ago out at a WashU event. And I've had an opportunity to interact and get to know him a little bit over the last 12 to 18 months. And have continued to be impressed with just him as a human, as a security leader. And I'm very excited to share the conversation with you today because I think you have a really fun background and a career trajectory that I think a lot of people are going to resonate with. And I think we're also going to cover it just a little different. Most of our kind of break into cyber roles have been really towards entry-level folks, but we're going to get a little different perspective of a senior leader in this today of where the things that how he broke in, how he got to where he's at, and really kind of what the future goes in. So Travis Nichols, welcome to the show. Glad to have you as a guest.
Thanks, Tony. I've really been looking forward to being here and getting to have this conversation.
So I know you. I just kind of, I got to know you quite a bit over the last, little bit. But I'd love for you to take a chance to introduce everybody to yourself, a little bit about yourself, and we'll get going.
Yeah. So I started out about 20 years ago. I had was going to school and needed some money, so I started working at nights at a trucking company. And when I finished my college degree, I ended up not wanting to go into that field. And so I stuck with trucking. It was good money at the time, and transferred down here to Columbia, Missouri, which is kind of like my hometown, and got into that, and then discovered there really wasn't a lot of opportunity for me in trucking. And so I wanted to do something else, wanted to take my life somewhere else. And so I started going to night school in the evenings in both a business degree and in computers, and started working with that and really enjoyed the schooling. But when I graduated, it was right after the end of the dot-com bust, and there just weren't a lot of cybersecurity jobs to be had. Or sorry, not only cybersecurity jobs, but even IT jobs to be had.
When you say things like IT and the dot-com boom, I remember that. It's crazy times to think of how far along we've come in this space and sector from that point to today. Making that first transition and exploring how you wanted, that you identified you wanted to do this. What were some of the things or classes, or how did you start to dive in and learn the skills you felt like you needed to make that transition from trucking over into an IT/cyber role?
Yes. So my dad had some roles as a business analyst, and he got into those. And as he was talking to me about that, I was like, well, that's really interesting, that juncture between IT and business and not just doing cool things with technology, but actually helping a company be successful with those and automate things. And of course, the late 90s, early 2000s, the internet was just coming on. Just having a website was a big deal. I remember the first job, we were actually had to measure the size of our images so that they weren't too big, because it could take too long to load if you had images.
Now you have software, you click a button and it compresses the image for you in 3 seconds. Where I'm sure back then it wasn't quite as easy to retrofit and make those things better. So how did you get your formal education, right? So you went from the trucking company to having the conversation with your dad about business analyst. What was that first role that you felt was kind of true IT that you took, and what was that, and how did you approach that role?
Yeah, so I mentioned it's right at the end of the dot-com bust, and having a hard time finding any kind of IT work. In fact, it was 2 years after I graduated before I got my first job at Carfax. And in the meantime, what do you do? How do you build that resume? How do you grow from there? What do you do? And so the best advice that I was given was, hey, volunteer, figure out, organizations that you want to help, and go volunteer. So one of the things I did, my dad was working at the University of Missouri, and they had a new system, and he said, hey, we need somebody to document it. I can't get you any money to be paid for it, but you could add it as a line to your resume. And so somewhere at the University of Missouri, on some shelf, I'm sure very high up, there's a three-ring binder, and it's probably all dusty, but I had to document a system, and it's 6 inches worth of paper of clipping on a button in the menu, and then documenting where that goes, pictures, and then if you click on this button, you go from there all the way through that system. So that's one thing that I did to add a line to my resume. Another thing was I found out local not-for-profits that needed some help with building kind of internal applications to keep track of their records. And so I did a couple of applications where I separated the front interface from the database behind it. And of course, this is 20 years ago. So a lot of this is, Access can do pretty quickly today, pretty easily. But back in the day, you really had to work at building these pieces. And so it allowed for multiple users to input data into a single database, and did that for free. Just gave them to the not-for-profits. I wanted to see them succeed, and it gave me experience and practice and something to talk about in interviews that was interesting to the interviewers.
So I think what's kind of interesting to point out in that, like, this predates GitHub. This predates a lot of those things that I know tips and tricks we're telling people in 2024 of, right, this is what you do to show your effort and work. So, you predate that stuff, which is great. So, how did you go and articulate or show your work to others through interview process? And, as you were trying to break into those jobs, how did you highlight those skills that you learned through those volunteer projects?
Yeah, so I think it's part of it is finding organizations that you're excited about to volunteer at, doing things that you're excited about, even if it's as simple as technical writing. And sometimes that can be complicated, but bringing in what you're doing. And when you come into that interview and you start saying, hey, I did this and I feel like it made a difference, and that passion, that drive, what interests you that you're willing to do that even off hours, not just 8 to 5, I did my job, I'm going to go home, now I'm going to go do something else, but that you're so interested in it that you want to take your free time and learn and grow and become good at. I think that's really what makes the difference in an interview.
That's really great advice. So now at this point, we've got our first job. What did that look like as you started to navigate your career, right? So you finally figured out that you got into it. But there's, as you know, that's evolved quite a bit, and there's many layers, especially in cyber and beyond. So how did you start to really look at what you wanted to do, where you wanted to go, and what were some of the, were there people you reached out to, were there groups you did? How did you start to really pinpoint where you wanted to head for your career?
So I think the key to career is being flexible and willing to consider new things and see if you want to pivot. In 2006, when I started at Carfax as my first full-time IT job, I came on as a software tester, and they had this thing called Agile, and it was fairly new. It's only coming in the late 90s, and they were hardcore about it, like very, very disciplined. They did XP, which was probably arguably one of the most defined and regimented types of Agile out there. The whole concept of today, people are a lot more flexible and figured out lots of ways to tailor Agile to their situations. But back in 2006, there was trying to establish itself. So you either were Agile or you weren't. And so for me, going from where I'd learned sequential programming and those kind of things to going into this Agile world and learning about all of that. And then as I got into it, I actually found that I really enjoyed a lot of the Agile coaching aspects. So helping the team on the retrospectives, helping in the planning games, setting those up, helping drive a team with their mindset where they wanted to go, and asking those open-ended questions and really learning the Agile practices. That provided me a lot of pleasure. And so the opportunity was there to grow. And so along with that, at the time, now it seems a little bit normal because there's the PMI, ACP, and different things like that. But at the time, it was, you were either Agile or you're waterfall. And that was the great controversy going, back and forth. And, I tried to start bridging that gap. And I went ahead and not only got the Agile certified practitioner from PMI, but also got the full PMP as a project manager. And then the opportunity came to move to being a project manager on the infrastructure side of the house at Carfax. And so rather than stay where I was comfortable and where it was easy, I chose a hard road, move over to a different area, get a different perspective, try some of that out, and did that. And that was a great opportunity. I got to be part of their first migration to the cloud. And again, this was 2013 or so. It was really new and really exciting. And so throughout my career, from there, I went to Veterans United and had several experiences, and then finally here to Shelter Insurance. And being able to look at the opportunities and say, hey, am I willing to take a chance? I'm good at what I do already, but am I willing to take a chance at being maybe even bad for a short period of time in order to be even the greater good and broaden those skills?
Well, there's one thing that I think has been from our getting on here and now is that the continued commitment to education, learning, and growing has been kind of fundamental to you as a person as you've grown your career, right? You've mentioned a master's degree and a certification. You're currently in a master's program, so that's awesome, and I think a testament, I'm assuming, to the culture of not just yourself but your organizations that support those things. But I also think you've taken some non-traditional approaches to your education, right? Like the program you mentioned now is you're studying marketing, which is, you're sitting in the lead security information or information security role, but you chose marketing. I'd love elaborate on that and really the what made you choose that and how you plan to apply that to your current role and future roles.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I finished a master's degree in cybersecurity from Missouri State University. And a great program, really loved it. A couple of years ago, though, I was looking at Rafiq Raymond's mind map that he does for CISOs and trying to look over the areas of what are we missing? What do we need to add here at Shelter to even be closer to what is our best? And I was looking at that. He recently added in his most recent mind map a whole section on marketing the information security department within your company. And that really captured my imagination because as an undergrad, I never really thought about myself being a great anything in marketing. I took a couple of marketing classes for a degree in business administration as an undergrad, but I thought of that as well. You've got to be an extrovert. You've got to have a lot of personality. You got to be brimming with ideas, all these things going on. And by this point, I knew myself well enough that, I struggled with ideas. Like I was really good about reading others' ideas and putting them together maybe in new ways or things like that. But just coming up with ideas, that was exhausting. If you get into Patrick Lencioni's studies about working genius, that was not my working genius, and I was aware of that, and not trying to make Travis be somebody besides Travis, but to be myself. And so, working through that, it really captured my imagination with this marketing aspect that Rafiq brought up. And so, when the opportunity came, thank you to Shelter for helping to fund my education. The opportunity to take a marketing degree and actually learn, in today's world with the data lakes and all the information that we didn't have 20 years ago when I first went to IT degrees, you can really drive to your product just by following what the data tells you and by using, AI and the different tools that we have available to us. And it's a lot less about being, having lots of ideas or having an outgoing personality, and even more about really following the data, knowing your market and knowing what will meet the needs of the market.
Yeah, I keep, the class WashU, I did the executive leadership certificate program out of WashU, and I was blown away, right, to your point of the importance of just the business acumen, understanding business needs, and honestly, storytelling is such a huge part of a security leader as you're trying to get buy-in, right, whether it be from executives for your budget, or buy-in from your peers for hiring and trying to determine their needs, or even for your junior staff of how you're coaching them up, but having the ability to really understand and embed the best business practices and project management and Scrum type of activities that aren't going to be part of your lessons that you're going to get in a traditional security class is really important because it makes you a well-rounded leader. I recently just learned of the idea of a BISO, right? The Business Information Security Officer, which I don't know, blew my mind. It seems like a great way given the size and scale of many organizations and the specific community needs that happen in, we're in St. Louis. So St. Louis is very different than Chicago or New York. So understanding what those local needs would be and advocating for those. As you look ahead, right, and I don't want to get too far ahead of us, but as you look ahead, what do you hope, through a master's in cyber, a Scrum certification, the list goes on, of adding a marketing degree, right? Like, what does long-term kind of look like for you, where you want to land?
So I hope to continue what I've been doing, which is, finding out what I enjoy, where I'm at, being willing to take a risk about changing move to a different position where I don't have the experience, but I have the aptitude and I have the skills, and growing out in that way. Particularly in cybersecurity, we know we can't ever get too comfortable, right? There's always that risk of having that bad day. A lot of the decisions that are involved in our success in cybersecurity aren't even our decision. We have to take kind of the hand we're dealt, and we have to have the skill about bringing that together in a way to be successful. And I see the career that same way. From here, maybe maybe a CISO somewhere, or maybe some other role, either at Shelter or at another company, where I can continue to bring together the marketing, the statistics, the cybersecurity, the IT, all of these skill sets together, that where you have to make decisions that need not just a singular focus, but need a multifaceted focus in order to understand the problem and come up with a solution that solves business problems.
I do really like the marketing aspect, because I think it plays to so many different things that happen through a daily or annual kind of life of a CISO, whether it be a breach and how do you handle that internally and externally. Like, there's so many applications I think that comes along with it. So kudos to you for thinking outside the box for a degree that, especially for a good school, right? You go into a good school there where, you're getting that education. So as we look back to your career, were there kind of key players or moments that resonated with you that kind of helped push you or nudge you into that direction? I know before we hopped on, you alluded towards kind of some mentorship and coaching of where you went from Veterans United to Shelter, right? Was there some kind of key moments in your career that really helped that stood out to your mind to get you to where you're at today?
Yeah, so several key moments. A couple that most come to mind are, big shout out to a gentleman by the name of Jim Knoll, who's the director there at Carfax. He took a risk bringing me on. I was, green and new, and he pushed me to figure out who I am, to figure out what I could do, and not be content with where I was at. And it felt sometimes a little bit uncomfortable, but it's really what I needed. As an introvert, as someone who hadn't pushed himself before, he really taught me the value and the joy of discovering new things about yourself. And so that served me well. And then I can't tell my story without including the name of Randy Raw. He's the CISO at Veterans United Home Loans. He's the person that brought me into cybersecurity. I'd always told myself if I got the opportunity that I would definitely do that. I was an agile coach, having a great time there at Veterans United doing that. And Randy said, well, hey, would you consider being an IT auditor within information security? And although I'd promised myself I'd get into information security if I got that chance, the thought of taking spreadsheets and comparing them all day long, that just didn't sound like a lot of fun to me. But he reminded me that not only would there be project management involved, but by being an IT auditor, and the only IT auditor starting up that program, I would also get the opportunity to learn about any system at Veterans United Home Loans that I wanted to. And so as a learner, that sounded really exciting. So I was working on that. And that's when I also started my first degree, my cybersecurity master's. And we were working through a class that was all about risk. And by the time we finished that class and put all of our papers together into one paper and telling that story, it was over 100 pages long. And as I was looking at that, I was thinking, risk, we categorize them into green, yellow, and red. And everything else is built off of that early decision. And so if you happen to have a bad day and called a yellow a red or a green a yellow, then that affects that all the way through. And you could really make some poor decisions later based on the data that you created early on. And as I brought that to Randy and started talking that through, Randy kind of got a little smile on his face and he said, hey, have you ever heard of quantified risk? I said, no, what's that? And he said, well, here's some links, here's some articles about that. And so I took that away, read up on that, figured out how that incorporated and answered the questions that I had about the whole risk setup and how that could take it from being kind of a feeling or a gut check, which if you don't have a lot of experience, it's really hard just to go with your gut, but really make it more empirical with data. And I built that up and I came back to him. I said, Randy, this is great. And I explained exactly how quantified risks address the concerns that I had with previous risk measurements. And he got that little smile on his face again. And he said, great, now go build me a team. And so I got promoted to manager and I had one other established person there and we started bringing in folks and started with risk and third-party risk management and auditing, and brought all those together and got to build a whole team there and see how all that happens. And then after a couple of years of that, Randy came to me one day and he said, Travis, you finished your master's degree and you've been doing a great job here. He said, I was talking to one of the executive vice presidents across town at Shelter Insurance, and they have an opening for someone to lead their information security program. And he said, you've done a great job for us, but you're ready. You should go take that position. Here's the link. And he gave me his blessing to go apply for that job. And so that's how I ended up here at Shelter Insurance. And, I owe so much to Randy for all of his encouragement. Sometimes the information he gave me was hard. At one point, I was, starting to think about that I might want to go beyond being a manager. And he came to me and he said, Travis, if you don't learn what executive presence is, you'll never move beyond manager. And that sounds a little bit harsh. And I said, Randy, what is executive presence? And he said, I can't tell you what executive presence is for you, but you're going to have to figure that out. We'll come up with the resources if you want some professional coaching or whatever you need, but you're going to have to figure this out, or you management, as a role as a manager will be the end of the road for you. And so I appreciate that tough love that he gave me, because that's really what I needed to be my best, just like the tough love that Jim Knoll gave me previously.
So with that, what did you use to improve your executive presence? What was that? And I'm genuinely curious as an individual and an executive myself, but what tools or things or classes did you lean into to grow your executive presence?
Sure. Well, you'd mentioned Washington University Roundtable, and I've been going to that for several years now. That involved, taking a day, driving 2 hours from Columbia to St. Louis, spending all day at the Roundtable, and then driving 2 hours home. Usually meant like a 12-hour day. So, it was some sacrifice. It was some effort. It was something that I had to be passionate enough that I wanted to put time that I could be sitting at home on the couch or whatever. And that's part of it. As we're talking about what does it take to level up, that's what it takes. It takes finding out what you're passionate about, what you're willing to put that extra time into. And so that's what I've been doing for the Cybersecurity Roundtable. And there was a gentleman by the name of Gary Latham there that helped MC those roundtables. And Gary had talked about the exposure that he had to a lot of different CISOs and a lot of different experiences. And so when Randy said, you've got to figure this out, I said, you know what? In my head, I'm thinking I know exactly the person that can help me figure this out for me. There were probably other groups, or you could go Google executive presence and get a coach, and that probably would have been the more standard way. I think if you asked Randy today, he probably was maybe even a little surprised when I came back to him and said, Randy, I talked to Gary Latham, and I think he ought to be my executive coach. And it laid out the experiences that Gary had. He had worked in the State Department and different things like that. And so for about 6 or 8 months, Gary and I met and just talked about what does executive presence look like. And he really started out of, what is your story? Because no one can tell your story like you can. And if you're lacking the confidence when you get in front of a group, a lot of times that's, you're thinking about, well, what if somebody can find a fact that I got wrong, or, can poke holes or criticize. But if you're telling your story, nobody knows your story like you do. And so that was just a place to ground myself. He reminded me that he had moments where he felt nervous before he spoke. And then, believe it or not, part of my homework from our meetings was to watch Ted Lasso. And, if you watch those, especially that first season, he's got so many great leadership skills that he does in order to go from coaching American football to coaching the real football in the UK, and being able to bring together a group of people who have very different background from him, in many ways have different interests that he does, and yet bring them together and lead them. And so that was a couple of the pieces of the executive coaching that Gary did with me, and just really helped me.
First, a great show. I'm one of my favorites of all time, which you can't see is my Coach Beard Funko Pop here. One of the best characters. He's one of my favorite characters, I think, of all time in any show. Coach Beard is fantastic. There's a consistent there, I think, that I want to make sure we kind of stop our foot on here. Right, you had help and people coached you along the way, but the consistent there was that you took the initiative to go find opportunities, make binders, offer your services to nonprofits. So there was a lot of self-ownership in there, where I think a lot of times people want others to do things for them, where you just kind of took it on your own. So that's a big foot stomp for me, for folks that are tuning into this, is that there are, yes, finding people, finding your mentors is a great way to maybe get some help in that. But sometimes some good old fashioned elbow grease and just throwing yourself out there for folks is going to go a long way. And you might be surprised at what somebody would really want to take from you if you give them an opportunity and you offer your support and services, right? Like there's a lot of, I think, lessons learned in there for people to tap into.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And particularly for introverts, we like things normal, predictable around us. If you can learn to embrace that uncomfortable, that uncertain as normal, and make that enough of a pattern in your life that you can really get your arms around it, your opportunities just really expand.
Yeah, I mean, the job market has softened up quite a bit, right? This year, it seems that there's a lot of layoffs that seem to be coming up, and there's a lot of kind of uncertainty within the workforce. And hopefully it's temporary, right? By the end of the year, everything kind of opens back up after something that happens in November that we won't talk about today in this. But I think hopefully things will change. Beyond that, and things start to open back up. But in the interim, this is a great time to do all the things that you just described, right? To go out, volunteer, build skills, find more classes, capture the flags, find all these things to really highlight, to put yourself out there and make friends along the way. And it's going to make that conversation and your applications go a lot further when things do open back up, or you find an opportunity that is available now that you can jump into because of some of the outreach and effort that you've done. What are some other groups that you've tapped into along the way in your career, right? The WashU Roundtable being one. Are there other things that you've taken an active role in to learn and grow?
Sure. So as you go along, most of the certification groups, they have local organizations. So for me, the Project Management Institute, the Mid-Missouri chapter was influential. I actually got to be part of their board. So, I have been a VP for before. They're on their board, and just getting to learn those skills and how they approach there, and learning from some folks with a lot of experience, that's great. And, you just, whatever organization you're in, just looking to see, what are their challenges, trying to really understand what the problems of the organization are. And then if you can help be a problem solver, there's no organization that has enough people to solve problems, right? Every group has its challenges. And if you're one of those people that solves those challenges and helps figure out solutions, you've made yourself invaluable.
Really solid advice. I think, the old adage of be the solution, not the problem, is always a good rule of thumb. If you find you're the problem, there's probably some deeper issues you need to look into. We're towards the tail end, so everybody gets the same last question for this one. What advice would you give for somebody looking to level up their cybersecurity career?
Yeah, so I would say think about what you're passionate about, because no matter what you do, if you're not passionate about it, you're going to burn out. You're going to get tired of it. Doesn't matter how cool it may seem, or a title that is only going to matter to you just a few minutes each month. Sometimes you're going to step back and say, "Wow, I can't believe I'm a manager, or I'm a director, or I've got this really cool job at Carfax." Whatever your role is, but most of the time it's just hard work. And so if you're not passionate about what you do, it's going to get old. It's going to wear on you. So I think that's the first thing. Figure out what you're passionate about, and then don't be willing to break your own mold. Like, create your mold, get solid, get your skills, and then break that mold and redefine yourself as something new, because that'll keep it fresh and that keeps that passion alive. And I think those would be my 2 points of recommendation on that question.
I like the idea of breaking the mold. I think it's too easy to kind of jump in and do the Sec Plus to the CISP to the this to the that, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with that trajectory. But if that's not really what you think you want to do, or you want to have a specialty in one of the 40 to 50 different roles within cybersecurity, there's different pathways in which you can pursue different certifications, right? Project management is a great certification, that PMP. You alluded to Scrum and Agile a little bit earlier. Another great, certification that those are not going away, and it gives you great opportunities to lead things for your organization. So, really great advice that I think you've shared with everybody today. Travis, thank you so much for being an incredible person. And this is, as I've gotten to know you, you stick out at the top of my mind as just, a good person who has always been a smile on your face, a great perspective, and a really good attitude in every room I've ever been with you before. So I just, kudos to you for carrying that, especially in a job that's stressful, right? A lot of times it's hard to have that face when you're having a bad day, but I've never seen you not be that way. So thanks for that too. Just, being a great leader within the security space and paying forward and having interest, even with our work at CyberUp, to help the future generations get into it. And then 3, just really appreciate you sharing your story today with our listeners. So thanks for tuning in for the show. Any alibis you want to add to kind of take away with that, to close on?
I think that covers it. I just appreciate the opportunity to share my story and talk to others. And, I often ask my team, what can I do to help you be your best? And I think that's a great question for us to ask each other, just to help continue to grow.
Yeah. Striving to be your best is always good. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in and listened today. Always appreciate our guests. As we wind down the end of the year, look into next year to start finding more shows. So if you want to come and join us, you have a topic or something you're passionate about, you've seen us cover a lot of areas, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would love to have you as a guest. Until then, thank you all so much for tuning in to Level Up Cyber, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.